Big debate in the last few days. The new patriotic party, that's the NPP's government, has hinted of plans to review the Petroleum Management Act to allow for the use of the Heritage Fund to finance its ambitions of a free senior high school policy. The senior minister, Osafo Maafo, at a forum in Accra yesterday, said that the Heritage Fund, which receives 9% of the country's annual petroleum revenue, will be used to sustain the program. He noted that doing so will guarantee the development of the country, particularly the youth. Quote, "We have to make an amendment to say that X% of the Heritage Fund or the Petroleum Fund will be used to support second cycle education. If we think that industry requires a certain stimulus that will enable jobs to be created and you are creating a job to build Ghana, then it's in the right direction. You can look at it and put a certain amount to it. We are also looking at agriculture." Unquote. So that's what the foreign minister, I beg your pardon, the senior minister, Osafo Maafo, has been saying, and a lot of discussion seemed to have popped up because of those comments he made, that they are going to, government is likely to turn to the Heritage Fund as part of the sources of funding to push the policy of the free senior high school education. The president himself, when he was talking over the weekend, mentioned that they are likely to look at the nation's natural resources. So it's very likely that the Heritage Fund, of which a percentage is from the petroleum revenue, is likely to be one of the sources of that funding that the president talked about. So what really is this Heritage Fund? The Ghana Heritage Fund was set up to purely for the purposes of intergenerational equity. This was passed by Parliament under the Petroleum Management Revenue Act in 2010 to provide an endowment of to support development for future generations. Now, keep this word in mind: future generations, because it's going to feature in our discussion. Okay, so currently Ghana receives only 5% of the royalty interest from the oil revenue. Out of this, 70% goes to the annual budget fund amount, and then 30% goes to the Ghana Petroleum Fund. Okay, we're just bringing you, information about the Heritage Fund and whether or not government is justified in any way to dip its hands in there to support the free senior high school policy. The 30% that is put together for the Heritage Fund is then divided into two parts, and 70% of this goes to the Ghana Stabilization Fund, while 30% is sent to the Ghana Heritage Fund. For the first 6 months of 2015, the Ghana Stabilization Fund yielded 0.47%, while the Ghana Heritage Fund actually declined in terms of how much it made. It got some negative 0.54%, negative 0.54%. Okay, the results were in sharp contrast to what was recorded in the last 6 months of 2014, which saw the Ghana Stabilization Fund return some 1.47% and 5.37% respectively for both funds for the Ghana Heritage Fund. The Ghana Heritage Fund was not meant to be touched and used by the present generation of Ghanaians. But then if you say present generation of Ghanaians, who are the present generation of Ghanaians? And if you say future generation, who are we talking about? Because senior high school is for the future generation, or not. So the final piece here is that the idea was to invest the fund in low interest earnings, but safe investments for the long term instead of a high yielding, gilt-edged securities, which variably could have some volatility. So those are some of the key pointers of the Heritage Fund. Government, as I've mentioned, is saying that they are considering using the Heritage Fund as part of the resources for in September. That's what the president said over the weekend. This was revealed by the president, and as I mentioned, over the weekend. However, Kwabena Edu-Gyamfi finds out that the policy may in any way affect enrollment to the private senior high school, because there are those who are saying, if so, everybody will move their kid to the the secondary schools that are owned by government, but there is a possibility it could affect private schools.